Good morning, class. We are going to start with our lesson 6.7 today. This lesson, I actually combined 6.6 lesson and 6.7 lesson together so that you guys can kind of hit two birds with one stone, kind of a deal. They're pretty much the same thing, so go ahead and write the lesson title, 6.7, Percents and Equations, and also the EQ, essential question, how can you use word clues to set up percent equations? So in order to set up equations using percents, you'll have to seek for certain word clues to help you set up the equation. So before we start, if you need to pause the video, you can do that to write the sentence. Okay. In order for us to set up the equation, first we need to know what parts are in percent equations. So we are always going to have part over whole. It's going to be expressed as a fraction. So part over whole, 1/4, 3/4, whatever it is, it's going to be a portion that you want to know over the whole thing. If you want to find out the percent of a portion of a part, you're always going to put it over 100. 100 is always going to be a constant number. Whenever you see a percent, it's going to be over 100. Now, if you're using a decimal, it's going to be obviously a little different, but really the gist of it is you're going to put the number divided by 100, so it turns into a decimal number instead of keeping it in a fraction form. So basically you're doing the same thing. Now, when you have these equations like this, part over whole equals percent over 100, you have to make sure that you also know the word clues for the other two, part and whole. I know the percent is going to be always over 100 because percent use a percent sign, right? So it's always going to have a percent sign. But how about part and the whole? We are going to see a lot of these questions that you have with the same structure or similar structures. You're going to see, I'm going to give you the words. Something something is, or is something, and then this is going to be of. Okay, I'm just going to introduce this to you right now so you have an idea of how can we identify which segments that we're missing, what we have to do, and so forth. Okay, so I'm going to move on. You have three different parts that can be missing. Part, the whole, or the percent. So let's start with finding the part. Okay, the top one, finding the part. Whenever you have a question that you have to find a part, you're going to see something like this. What is, let's say, 20% of 40? Okay, something like this. What is 20% of 40? Now, what you're going to do is you're going to set up equation. Okay, and see what information I can use first before I set up the equation. So first I have 20%, and that is always going to be over 100. So I'm going to put 20 on the top. I don't have to use the percent sign on the top or on the bottom. 20 over 100 is just 20% when you change it into percentage sign. So 20 over 100. And then I also have another word clue. Of 40. Of 40. So this gives you a clue saying that 40 is going to be the total number of something. Total of 40. So you're going to put 40, the whole thing, on the bottom. So what are we missing? We're missing a part. You can either use P for the part or you can use X. I'm just going to put X. Okay. So after you have that, all you have to do is to do the cross multiplication. Okay. So like the butterfly effect. You're going to do 100 times x equals 20 times 40. Okay. So x is going to equal 100x is going to equal 800. X is going to be 8. So what is 20% of 40? 8 is going to be 20% of 40. Okay, so that's how to find part. Now, if you don't want to use this method, which is going to give you more time, I guess, require more time, you can also work on it with a decimal. So this is the first way. The second way is just using decimal. If you have the whole, if you know what the whole is, all you have to do is to multiply by the percent. Now, when you're multiplying by percent, you have to change it into decimal. So 20% is going to be decimal 0.2. So I'm going to multiply 0.2 by the whole number. If I do that, it's going to also give me 8 because you're going to move one decimal point to the left. So either way, you can use it. Obviously, the second way is going to be quicker, but you just have to make sure that you are multiplying the fraction changed into decimal. So percent into decimal, that's the key point. Finding the whole is very similar to what you were doing for the part. So you may have questions like this. 6 is 15% of what number? Or what? Okay, 6 is 15% of what number? So again, if you want to use the first method, you're going to go ahead and set up the equation. And it's going to be like this. And you identify what you have. So 15%, I already have it. So I'm going to put always over 100, 15. And then my other word clue is 6 is. 6 is. So whenever I see is, it's going to be a part. So it has to go up on the top. 6. And then I'm just going to use x for the missing number. I need to find out the whole thing. I don't know what my number is, but it has to be on the top. So I do the same thing. 15 times x equals 6 times 100, which is going to be just 600. And then how you find out the numbers, you just do 600 divided by 15. Okay. X is going to be 40 if you do 600 divided by 15. So that's one way to do it. Like I said, you're going to do the cross multiplying. Okay. And then for the second way, what you can do is you have to set up an equation like this. 6 is 15 or 0.15, because whenever I use a second one, I always have to use second way, always use a percentage into decimals. Okay. So I'm going to change 15% into decimals, 0.15 times, I don't know the number, x. So if you set up the equation like this, you actually have to solve for x. So if you do 0.15 times x equals 6, you really have to divide both sides by 0.15. So what you're going to do is 6 divided by 0.15. Okay, so what you're going to do is you're going to do part divided by percent. Okay, so this is part divided by percent. You can do that. okay, for a second way. So if you do that again, you can use a calculator for this one. I'm not going to limit you guys to the operation, but 0.15 divided by 6, or sorry, 6 divided by 0.15 is going to be 40. Okay, so you're going to have the same number again for both of the methods. How about finding the percent? Finding the percent is probably the easiest way. Because you're going to see questions like this. What percent of $16 is 5? Something like this. Okay, I'm just changing up the number so it's not all the same. What percent of 60 is 5? I don't know. Let's set up. So here we go. I know percent is always over 100, but guess what? I don't have the percent, so I have to find out and fill in the other information first. Of 60. Of 60. So of is going to be the whole, so it's going to be on the bottom, the whole thing. And then is going to be 5. It's going to be on the top. And I don't know the percent, so I'm going to just put it as x over 100. Okay. Whenever you have like quizzes or tests, you usually see your score over the total. What do? All you have to do is to divide the two numbers. You can do that as well. So if you want to use this way though, you're going to do cross multiplication. 60 times x equals 500, and then you divide 500 by 60 on both sides, and it's going to give you a decimal that's repeating. Okay. So it's going to be 8.3 repeating, so I'm just going to put 8.33. Okay, so what percent? 8.33%. That's it. Right? Now, like I said, if you want to go ahead and just find out using the decimals, or better yet, you can just divide 5. So part divided by whole. You can do that. So 5 divided by 60, and then times 100. Okay. If you do that, so it's going to be 5 divided by 60, and then you just multiply 100. It's still going to give you the same answer. Okay, so the third one, the last one, finding the percent, you're really just finding the decimal and then changing into the whole percent. If you want to stick with the first method where you are setting it up the equation, that is probably the most consistent way for you to work on it. But if not, you can go ahead and work on it using the second ones, which involves using decimals. I think this one is telling you like to do this. So for example, percent equals percent times, what's the whole number, 60 equals 5, and then you're just dividing it by, so it's going to be the same thing. You really don't have to know this. Okay, so we looked into 3 different ways: finding the part, finding the whole, finding the percent. Notice is or of, these are all keywords. So whenever you have them, you are going to look at them and say, hey, is it going to be a whole thing or a partial of it, or am I finding the percent? So you can look into those questions. Let's do a couple of example questions. Okay, so example, what is 145 point, I'm just going to do this, 145% of 20. Okay, now even though you have a percent that is greater than 100%, you still set up the equation as the same. So don't put 145 on the bottom ever, because it's going to be a bigger number than 20. So I'm going to first identify what am I missing. It says what is, so I probably miss is. Okay. And I have percent 145. It's always going to be on the top, and the bottom number is always going to be 100, and of 20. So of is going to be for the whole thing, so I'm going to put 20 on the bottom, and I don't know what is, so that's going to be the top one. I am missing the top, which is the part. If you notice, because 145 is going to be a bigger number, the x is going to be greater number than 20. So I do cross multiplication again. 100x equals 20 times 145. So when you do 20 times 145, it's going to be, what, 2900. Okay, it's like this, 2900. And then good thing I have 100x, because when you have two zeros, you can cancel it out. X, just one x, is going to be 29. So what is 145% of 20? 29 is going to be 145% of 20. Or you may have questions like this. 380 is 125% of what number? Okay, so again, I am going to look for clues. 100 is always going to be on the bottom. I see the percent, so I'm going to do 125. And I see something something is. So when you see something something is, that's going to be on the top, and I am missing the bottom number. So cross multiply. 125x equals 380, and then times 100, that just add 20. That way I don't really have to write more. So 38,000 divided by 125 gives you x equals 304. So 304, if you notice, x is going to be smaller than 380, because that 304 is 100%, 380 is 125%. So that's going to be an interesting thing. Don't put the big number on the bottom. Based on the percent, not on the number. Okay, so that's one of the questions, or a couple of questions that you could do on your own. Now, I am going to have you guys practice, let's see, from the textbook. So, it's going to be textbook page 326. I'm going to give you page 326. Okay, and this is going to be in class work. That means you're going to work on these questions in class. Once you are done with all the questions, you're going to get those questions checked to see if you showed work. If you did not show work, you're going to be asked to do them again. So Even if you're using a calculator, I need you to set up the equation in the correct way and maybe show like a couple of steps like this on the top so you know what you're doing and I know what your brain is doing. If you're using decimals, like the ones up here, you still need to show me what you're going to do so I know what numbers are being processed in your head. I'm going to have you guys do odd numbers. So 1 through 15. Odds. That's 8 questions. And then I'm going to have you guys do 21 through 27 odds. Okay. So you're going to do all the odd numbers and then you're going to get it checked. You're going to get it checked. And then if you are done, you're going to have a handout. It's not going to be from the textbook. Your homework is going to be from a handout. So you're going to pick up your handout, which is going to have practice 6.6, and then you're going to start working on your homework questions. And if you finish it in class, good for you. You don't have any homework. And if you don't get to finish it, you get to finish it and bring it back by Friday, I believe. So you'll have a couple of days to work on these questions. If you need to watch it again, you can go ahead and watch it again. If you need to do some questions from the textbook, example questions are great. You can work on those example questions and so forth. So homework is actually going to be 6.6 practice worksheet. Okay. The reason why you have it from 6.6 is because I'm combining them, and 6.6 worksheet had better laid out questions for the first day. So I think that is about it. I hope you guys remember how to do these from previous years, but if not, it's okay. We're always reviewing. Make sure we know what to do. I know we had these kind of questions for your map testing, so if you didn't get these questions right for this past map testing, you can always practice and get them right for the next one. So until then, I'll see you guys tomorrow and hope you guys have a good day.